All right. I just, first of all, want to thank all you guys and female for taking the time here to answer some questions and have some dialogue. I think for all of us, in speaking privately and in the lead up to this, I think we all kind of share a belief that we're very fortunate to have gotten different opportunities and in that process, always feeling like, you want to help people and you want to answer questions when they come. And sometimes there's just not enough time in the day to get back to everyone that reaches out and do it in a way where the quality of the response, is something that you could be proud to send to somebody. So I just was hoping, just kind of on a whim, I kind of feel like this thing came about like that Long Island University hockey team, like just had an idea 2 hours later, we announced it, so that was kind of, interesting. But I figured this would just be a good opportunity to get a lot of people together with differing backgrounds and just kind of share our, path to this point and have a little fun and answer some questions that I got on Twitter from some different people. So kind of before I have everyone just introduce himself and talk through for a couple minutes about their experience, before we started recording, Craig, I thought you said something that was, really prudent and was really a great way to kind of open this up. So I'll flip it to you. And if you could kind of go through that again, I think it's awesome for people to hear.
Yeah, for sure. When I look at the screen of everybody here, I mean, everybody's arrived where they're at currently through different paths in different ways. And, people believe in you. But the biggest thing to me is you, all of us and the people here were able to, invest of themselves so people could believe in you. I'm a huge New England Patriots fan. I'm a huge Bill Belichick fan. He always talks about grinding. And you can have all the talent in the world. If you're not willing to grind and use that talent in an effective way, doesn't matter how much talent you have. And what people want to see is you're willing to do different things. And I can look at everybody on this screen and see that everybody's willingness to do different things, just kind of put their work boots on and get to work and do whatever was asked of them, has helped them arrive at this point. And it's going to help them arrive at even higher positions in hockey if they so desire. So, it's really important. I share a story about my father, my late father. He's from Rochester, grew up playing all the sports, played a little bit of hockey, but he was a baseball, football, and basketball guy. Anyway, his dad died when he was 19. He was away at college. He had to come home. He had 2 younger sisters and a mother, and really he had to get to work. But he was working for the baseball team, the minor league baseball team in Rochester, the Rochester Red Wings. And how he ended up in hockey, the baseball season ended. The hockey group came over and said, we're looking for somebody that might be willing to do some publicity. He said, I'll do it. Over he went. Jack Riley, a longtime executive in the NHL, took him under his wing and the rest. But it's that willingness to grind. And like I say, I can look at everybody on this screen and I know that you're great examples of that.
You could tell that one of us that's actually on TV all the time. That was unbelievable. So I guess I'll just pick one person. Greels, I'll start with you. Just kind of talk about how you, got into the business and started and, maybe some hurdles that you faced in the beginning, challenge you overcame, some people that helped you, and then we'll just kind of go, around the group and have everybody tell a similar story.
Yeah, so Steve Greeley, the assistant GM with Buffalo, and kind of the way I got into the game, I had played at Boston University and played 1 year in the East Coast Hockey League, which is 04-05, and I think I probably realized that I wasn't going to be an NHL player when I was 15 or 16, but had the goal of staying in the game. And when I stopped playing, I quickly realized, hey, this is a difficult league to get into. It's a difficult sport to get into, whether you're trying to do college coaching or working in the NHL. So I started to dip into a little bit of a network I had established in the hockey game. And I took a job in finance full-time, working in Boston. And while I did that, I would caddy in the weekends and at golf courses and send my resumes to all the GMs in the league. And, when I look back, I realized how many applications or resume these teams do get, and you have to find a way to separate yourself. But one of the breaks I got was I used to caddy for Mike O'Connell all the time. And Mike had just taken a job with the Los Angeles Kings. And I think about 2 months after I had sent him a letter, he invited me over to his house for basically an interview. Didn't tell me it was an interview, and went to his house and ended up spending 4 hours there talking hockey. And 48 hours later, I was on a plane to LA. And at that time, I didn't even realize you could book a flight 48 hours in advance. I thought you had to do it a month in advance. But, Ryan, you asked us before about a little adversity we faced. Like, I left the job in finance, and, took a very entry-level job, part-time job with LA, and worked a graveyard shift in a warehouse, kind of a distributorship company. And, that's kind of where I got my start, and that goes back to, I think, 2006. So.
Well, I have a really kind of unconventional path into this. I started as a journalist out of school in 2003. I was lucky enough to have my first job be as the beat writer in Minneapolis, covering the Minnesota Wild. And for whatever reason, the GM, Doug Risebrough, and I got along really well. I was curious about him. My dad had grown up watching his Bruins lose year in and year out to the Montreal Canadiens, and there were 4 of those Canadians who were in real positions of leadership with the Wild. And so I was curious, and he was willing to reciprocate that curiosity. The lockout came along, and I got a chance to go back home to Boston and write about the Red Sox for the Boston Globe. And that was the year after Theo Epstein had that team win the World Series for the first time in 86 years. And Doug began this kind of curious, line of phone calls to me about, what are they doing? How are they using all this data I hear about in video? So about a year and a half later, after a couple of dinners we had where he'd talk about, maybe you could be in hockey someday. And it was like that scene where George is talking to Jerry, and Jerry says, well, those jobs in broadcasting tend to be for ex-ball players and people in broadcasting, and you're neither. And Doug kind of got into the point with me that, you can't really coach because you never played, but I could see you in management. So about a year and a half into my time covering baseball, he offered me the position of director of hockey ops with the Wild. The first task of that was to organize all of the jerseys in the basement. And there was a lot of buying of Rubbermaid bins, and, the title was 10 times the job. But those 4 years that I spent with the Wild, it was like going to university for a master's or a doctorate in hockey. Doug and Jacques Lemaire taught me the game on a day in, day out basis. The education was incredible. So I would say I learned as much or more than I contributed in those 4 years. The adversity would be that at the end of that time, ownership changed and we had a turnover of 20 plus people, myself included. And so I went 10, 11 months without a job and would go to every single Wild, visiting team hotel to see the assistant GM or the GM when they came through town. Went to the GM meetings in March. So I was 10 months in unemployment and lined up 10 meetings. And Brian Burke was one of them. He was GM of the Leafs at that time. And he sat down and he said, you know what your problem is? And I'll leave out the expletives. And he hadn't even said hello. And I said, no. And he said, well, your problem is there's one guy who's hired you into this league and no one knows why he has. And I said, perfect. And I said, here's why. So he gave me 10 minutes at that point. And when he got up, he said, okay, if we have an opening, I'll think about you. Well, a few years later, he walked into the office in Calgary and I was sitting there as an employee. But at those meetings, Jay Feaster just happened to walk by, had not had a meeting planned with me, but we kind of knew each other. And he saw me meet with people, thought maybe I was going to get hired. And 2 days later, offered me a consulting position that became a job. And if he hadn't, then I don't know if I'd be working in the league today. So the line is fine. And I think that, the lesson is that you need one, you only need one, but you need one.
Todd, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I would say first, even just everybody on this panel, the connections that each of us have with everybody individually that is sitting here on my computer screen. It's amazing the history, even if it's a small or most recent history you have with everyone here. So to me, it's all about the people that you get to know. Similar to Chris, I had an experience with the Minnesota Wild too, where they were looking to hire somebody to be a video coach back in the year 2000, the first year of the Wild's existence. I didn't know anything about video. I didn't know anything about editing. I didn't know anything about using computers, but somehow I was able to get an interview with Doug Riseborough, same guy that Chris was talking about. And over a kind of like a long lunch, we figured out we had a shared passion for fly fishing. So automatically he knew he wanted to hire me. But I had to get through the next hiring process, which was going to be Jacques Lemaire and Mario Tremblay and Mike Ramsey. So I was able to go through the assistant coaches first. They had a lot of fun with me. We were able to have a lot of things in common. I think they saw me as a young guy who, as Craig said, working hard it's not something special. It's a standard. It's the yardstick for everybody. Anybody's going to come in and say they're going to work harder than the next person, but that's just expected. So I think those two gentlemen understood that I was going to put forth my best effort every opportunity, and then I had to convince Jacques. So those two guys kind of set me up, and Snowy would know just as good as anybody that Jacques is one of the funniest guys in the world, and they kind of set me up that I had to have Jacques laughing. So I went in, and Jacques was asking me a bunch of questions, and I was trying to give some answers to make him smile, and a couple little bit of smart aleck things going on for some personality for me to see that they would have I had a little bit of personality, and Jacques never smiled one time. And just at the end, he said, okay, you're too stupid. You're going to work with the defense with Mike Ramsey. So that's kind of how it went for me. From there, the track just kept going. Jacques, just like Chris said, it was like a university, just by osmosis, being around Jacques and Doug Riseborough. And, those gentlemen have forgotten more about hockey than I'm ever going to know about the game. And just I had evolved underneath them. And then it was time to move on. I went to the Capitals, from the Capitals to the Kings, where I got to work with Steve Greeley. We won a cup together. And then from there into the Calgary Flames, and from the Calgary Flames to the Winnipeg Jets, and from the Winnipeg Jets now to the University of Vermont. So to me, it's all about the people that you meet, the connections that you keep, the relationships that you manage, that you do with sincerity, where you show that you care about people and help them along the way, just like someone has helped you along the way. So long-winded answer, but that's how I got where I am right now.
It's funny, one of the questions I got on Twitter was like, how do you, make first contact and break in? So it just appears that the answer is just no Doug Riseborough, and
We'll put his phone number up at the end. I'm sure he'll like that.
That's good. Noelle, how about you?
So I had obviously a unique hiring process, but it started actually as I was the head coach of the U16 midget team out of Sioux Falls, and we had signed up to go to a tournament in South Kent. And prior to going out there, I was doing everything that I could to actually cancel our trip because I was so offended.
Wait,
that
are you about to tell an embarrassing
team,
story about me on my own panel?
No, I was so embarrassed that their 16 team wouldn't play ours. And so we were slated to play their 15. So we begrudgingly went out there, and we had a pretty decent showing. We were only a second-year program at that time, but Ryan Hardy actually happened to be there watching for the program. And unbeknownst to me, a year later, I get a phone call, and it's from him asking me to come out to his the Experience. Probably the best named camp that we've ever heard of. And that led to just being recommended to go through the process with Toronto. And it was an anonymous hiring process that required video and writing your own reports and so forth, and submitting them and being assigned a number, and then just those being evaluated by their staff and so forth. And that's in short, basically how I got hired. My reports did pretty well, apparently, and so I've been with Toronto for 2.5 years now.
I feel like you kind of are underselling like how you started. Could you talk about like legend hockey and how you made the decision to do that and start the Sioux Falls program, and just the time that you put in on a daily basis to, build your career?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. My family ranches out here in South Dakota, and I was recruited to go to Shattuck St. Mary's, and I spent 6 years there. And at the time, I was just so fortunate because the culture and my friends and everyone that I was surrounded with, everyone that I was able to skate with on a daily basis was very elite. And everyone there at the time had an elite mentality to not only just like be successful and play Division I, but we're talking about guys that are now just phenomenal leaders in the NHL and so forth. And so that's always been my mentality and what I was used to being surrounded by. And I played college hockey. I got injured really badly. I moved back home, and I started a hockey training company called Legend Hockey, and basically did whatever I had to, which at the beginning required building a culture in a very non-hockey market and sleeping in my truck so I could do lessons. And that resulted in starting the Sioux Falls Power Hockey program with Matt Tobin, our GM. And, we decided to make a coaching change at the 16s, and it was he that really gave me the vote of confidence to coach the midget level. And, honestly, I just have spent the last 10 years putting in as many hours as I can. I try to outwork everyone. I try to work as hard as I can. I'm completely consumed with it. And I felt like all of those minutes put in resulted in being able to take an advantage of it, an opportunity that fortunately for me was merit-based.
Yeah, I thought it was like the story is way funnier. So I was there watching Joel Farabee play. And so my buddy was coaching the other team that Noelle was coaching against. And Noelle's team was crushing them. It was like 5 or 6-0. And so he decided that he was going to hang 2 guys at the far blue line and try to play with 3 in the zone against her 5. And she was like unflappable, and just, her guys just kept playing. And it was a massacre. And I was like, wow, this is like an impressively, run thing. And then, I've been so fortunate for Noelle and I to have continued a friendship and, just get to like learn from her all the time. So she's pretty humble in that experience, but it was entertaining for me, to say the least. So I guess since Noelle went to Shattuck, we'll go to the guy with some ties to Shattuck.
Well, it seems like it's the common denominators, the words that we keep hearing is obviously grind, relationship, passion, and also the 3 words, and we can elaborate more on those words, but that, all of us, I guess, on this panel here, we had the fire burning to do something, and we were willing to go above and beyond in order to achieve our goals. And so when I first started, I played hockey 4 years in the Quebec League, but after that, I had a couple of tryouts with Montreal, played in Europe for a year, but I soon realized that I wasn't going to be an NHL player. So long story short, I had an opportunity to move to California. I didn't know what I was going to do. My biggest obstacle was I didn't speak English much. I still don't anymore because Ryan always laughed at me. But a little better than 30 years ago. But I was I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing, but I wanted to be in hockey and grinding. I was willing to grind. I was willing to pay the price. I went from, obviously I was illegal here, washing cars, doing everything it takes to stay here and to survive. But since I understood the locker room, I understood players well. Luc Robitaille, who was a great friend of mine, we played on the same line for the Hall Olympics, and Steve Duchesne, who had played with him in Drummondville. They were both great players for the LA Kings. They welcomed me to live with them. And, but, you go live with friends, 2 weeks, a month or so, you gotta, friendship is one thing, but you also have to be, you can't just sitting on their couch and just, take from them. And I understood my role. I understood that I had to, I didn't have to, I got off my butt pretty quick because I saw it as an opportunity to be around players, around the locker room, and and understanding what their needs are. I understood from a player standpoint, but I soon jumped into the other phase was trying to understand the representation of players or the marketing demands there were at the time. Not too much, but it gave me an opportunity to dive in and search with other people. And I was lucky to meet Tom Rich, who was at that time a famous baseball agent who had just started with Mario Lemieux. Mario was a friend who had played against relationship. If you treat people right, if you invest your time in people, I mean, it will come back to you in a positive way. So I was able to do that at a very, very young age, but the grind, there was no time in a day. If you call me at 4 a.m., I'd be there, you know, like those are things that obviously all of you wouldn't be where you're at if you didn't have that. So for me, those were early stages. I didn't know, again, what I was going to, my goal wasn't to become an agent. I didn't know. I dabbled into the music industry a little bit when I came here. I dabbled into the ice rink business, Isoplex. I was the first, I was the founder of Isoplex, not financially, because I didn't have a pot to pee in, so to speak, but I was able to assemble a bunch of investors. And obviously Luc Robitaille, being the name he was in California, it really helped raising money, and we were able to build the first rink there. So, and it was an area where the Kings used to practice at Culver City, where the practice facility was so bad. And we convinced Bruce McNall to sign a 15-year lease with us to become the official practice facility of the LA Kings. But Bruce went to jail 2 years later, so the lease was broken up. But then when Anshul Sudakov came in after that, Anshuls came in, and with Tim Lewicki, and they took over in the lease, and we were able to survive. But with all of that, I was always willing to learn. Like, I was involved in the ice rink business. I sold dasher boards. I sold all the advertisement on the dasher boards in the Zamboni. You know, if I was on the plane sitting next to someone, and let's say he was the CMO of Budweiser, I made sure that we exchanged cards by the time I'm off the plane. We established some sort of a connection so I can sell them a dasher board. And there's stories that I was able to turn these discussions or relationships into engaging into a business, a positive, proposition of some sort. So the one, I was lighting matches, I guess, different matches, but always pushing forward. My love was hockey. I didn't know till I got a real opportunity when Luc and Steve Duchesne and I'd say Mario Lemieux to be involved with the Riches gave me an opportunity to jump into the business, because I didn't know how to negotiate a contract. I didn't know the CBA, and learn watching these guys, watching Tom, even Steve Rich doing it, and sitting there in the room and learning from there. And then next is history, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so cool. Like, I think every young person, and I could just, speak in my own experience, and I'm sure everyone else on the call, except for Craig probably, because he's our senior leader here, looks at you and has, holds you in such high regard. And I think it's nice that you're able to communicate about how humble your beginnings were in this business, and that, what everyone knows is Pat Brisson, wasn't, what you were when you came, to this country, and you had to grind. And it's funny, people always say, this guy's got this, but, I think it gets lost in translation a lot of times, just how much effort and how much sacrifice and how close you are to having nothing, at some point to get where you are. So I think that's an awesome message. And I guess, Craig, if you want to talk about your story, and then Danny, because mine kind of comes after Danny because it's tied together. So I think that'd be a good order, and then we'll get into some questions.
I mean, my story was, I grew up in a hockey family. My dad was in hockey. My mother was punch-in like secretary. So call it the family business. But, I was like Pat. I was like everybody, Steve and Todd. My dream was to be a player, but I recognized that I wasn't going to be one. And I was headed to a career in banking, international banking. And Jack Ferreira, a BU graduate, and Steve, very well, Todd, and we all know him. He had worked with my father. And when he was working with the New York Rangers, I was in school in Montreal, and he wanted me to do some part-time scouting. I said, no, I'm having too much fun on weekends doing things that you didn't get an opportunity to do. He got the job in Minnesota. And I was well along the path of interviewing with banks and headed that direction. And I sent him a congratulatory note, and he phoned me and he said, "Do you want to come and work in hockey?" And I told him what I was doing. He goes, "Just try it." He goes, I got a part-time job for you if you want it. He doesn't pay much. He goes, and if you don't like it, I'll help you in the banking area. I know lots of people that can help you get into the banking. So I said, sure, I mulled it over. And I said, why not? It was $4,000 a year. My dad thought I was absolutely crazy. He told me I was crazy, not exactly in those words, using the words of Brian Burke. That's how he described it to me. And, you know, you just realize again that no matter what you're asked to do, just do it. I had some great experiences with Glenn Sonmore, the late Glenn Sonmore. I would drive, I would laugh, but you know, it wasn't before long that I was doing a lot more. I ended up in a really solid spot. And again, everybody's talked here about all the people that help along the ways. You know, Jack Ferrer, Dean Lombardi was our assistant GM, Les Jackson, Chuck Grillo, and then Bob Clark comes in and Bob Gainey comes in. I mean, and just from there, I mean, not people that I knew. I mean, I knew of them, but all of a sudden now you're building these relationships and you're learning from them. You know, we talk about the education you get, Todd, you talk about Jacques Lemaire, Chris, you talk about Doug Risebrough. I mean, Bob Gainey, Bob Clark. I mean, that's what we get around. Pat's talking about Mario Lemieux and Luc Robitaille. I mean, those are the fortunate. I mean, Steve, you're at BU. I mean, BU is just a factory for coaches and players and management types. And, you know, Dan, you jump right from the USHL to the NHL. You're working with David Poyle, lifelong friend. I mean, him and my dad worked together forever. And, you know, we end up, I mean, Noelle, I worked for the Leafs a little bit. I tell you about my mother being punch him like secretary. I mean, you're working for one of the most storied franchises in the NHL. And to your point, Noelle, about, you know, it was merit-based, it was anonymous. You get in there. Not everybody gets in that way. I think it speaks volumes about their process and being hired on merit. I knew some people, but I do know that there's no darn way, to Pat's point, you might get an opportunity to get in the door. You don't stay inside unless you show you can work and add value. So, I mean, I've been incredibly fortunate over my career. And I mean, now in broadcast, I didn't know. I mean, people ask me, how'd you get in broadcast? I said, it's really simple. Just get fired. That's what you got to do. And then you move on from there. Right. So, I mean, and like, you know, I get an opportunity to do so many different things at TSN and NBC with the draft and with prospects. So it's not just like I'm doing one thing. I get to do a lot of different things. And I'm still the same way now as I was when I started. Whatever you want me to do, sign me up. I'm prepared to do anything. Because quite frankly, I don't think I've worked in hockey a day in my life. Because to everybody's point, it's a passion. It's something that I love doing, and I love the people all in it.
That's awesome. Danny, how about you?
Well, first of all, just thanks for being on, Hardy. Thanks for having me be the follow-up to that, because I'm definitely not going to be able to articulate my story as well. But this is a real honor just to be with this group. You know, I don't know if I'm fully deserving of it, but it's an honor nevertheless just to be here with you guys and be kind of sharing our stories. You know, for me, my background was different than a lot of people in the sense that, you know, I grew up all over the country and actually started playing the game at 11 years old in Alabama, where they only had 2 rinks. And from there moved up to Massachusetts in high school. And, you know, when you start at 11 playing in Alabama, you're behind the 8 ball. And so I wasn't a very good player at all, but I was always, you know, priding myself on just my work ethic. And I don't think anybody loved the game more than I did. And so those things carried me on to the point where eventually got an opportunity to play Division III college hockey. Even there, you know, I was, you know, wasn't much of a player, but, you know, everything I developed because I worked hard at it, and I had some great coaches along the way that helped me. And so when I finished playing college hockey, you know, I didn't really know what I was going to do. Originally, I was a criminal justice major, so I thought I'd become a cop or I'd become a lawyer. And I took that year after college to study for the LSATs. Eventually decided to go to law school. And so while I was doing that, I was an aide in a classroom for students with special needs. And I started coaching. I got a great opportunity right off the bat to work in some youth hockey, working some teams, but then also to be an assistant coach at Milton Academy, a prep school just outside of Boston. And I absolutely loved it. Like everything I was doing, from the being an assistant, working for a really a great coach, Paul Canada, who had coached in college hockey, and learning from him, and just doing every possible thing I could to be on the ice, working skills programs, just hockey at night, anything I could find. And I loved what I was doing. I loved being in a classroom. So that year I studied for the LSATs, applied, got into law school. And it was actually at the open house for a law school that I walked out and called my father and said, listen, I'm going to try to coach and teach. And like, that was the point for me where I knew that was the path I wanted to go down. So the following year, I got a job at a Catholic school outside of Boston, teaching full time. I was back as an assistant coach at Milton Academy, and I was just adding things on. I had an opportunity to go work at a USA festival during the summertime. I'd work every hockey camp I possibly could, and just trying to be around the game and learn the craft. And at the same time, I was basically teaching myself how to be a teacher. I had zero teaching background. I wasn't a history major, and I was teaching history. So I was staying a few chapters ahead, but it was actually a great process for me because I was teaching. I was learning how to teach in a very, I guess, difficult way, but it was great. And that experience was incredible for me in terms of the path that I ended up being on. Towards the end of that year, teaching and coaching, I remember looking around just in the teachers' lounge at all the other teachers and saying to myself, well, that person like is a great teacher and they're passionate about teaching, but they're also passionate about English, and that person's passionate about history. I'm passionate about hockey, and I love teaching. I love what I'm doing, but I want to do it full time. So I had the time I was running a skills program. I was teaching full time. I was working as an assistant coach, and after that year, I just started applying to basically every college I could. I sent out, just an email saying I'll work for free, any volunteer position, any Division III position. I interviewed for some and didn't get them. And eventually actually working at a hockey school, just talking about the connections that you make in the summertime. I was with a guy, Matt Lindsay, who's the assistant coach at Penn State, and he was a Williams grad. And while we were working the camp, he said there might be an assistant job open at Williams. And so right away, I sent my stuff in. A couple weeks later, I was packing up the car and kind of gave up everything that I had there in terms of a little bit of a safety net and a teaching job and working a skills program, everything else, to go make $6,000 a year with no insurance. But I was a full-time coach, and it was awesome. Like that year, that experience was absolutely incredible. It was a little bit of a leap of faith. But I think you have to take some of those too, and you just got to take the right ones. And so I went from there, had a great experience working for Bill Kangas at Williams College, and that led to some different opportunities. In that summer, I got to apply for some Division I jobs that were full time. And for me, that was the next goal. I didn't think I had to do it right away, but when it was there, I wanted to. And I'll never forget, because I was making $6,000 a year, I just gotten engaged after that year, so I needed to make some sort of money. I'm working construction for my father-in-law in the off season because he'd give me days off where I could go recruiting, and I'm doing phone interviews at my lunch break on a construction site. And so I went from there, ended up going to Sacred Heart University for a year, which led to going to Yale University, where I spent 6 years. And I guess I should almost backtrack. Along the way, all these steps, I'm around great people. And I'll never, for me, and I think probably everybody could say the same thing in the sense that, this is just it's a great game. It's easy to find those great people. And when you work hard for them, they'll go out of the way for you. And I don't know if it's like that in other sports or other industries, but it's, I think, one of the things that makes our game and what we do so special. But when I got to Yale, I got to work for Keith Elaine, who, you talk about people, everybody's got a couple of people probably that have really impacted their careers and their lives. He's number one on my list for sure. I spent 6 years working for him, and, he had worked in the NHL. Just an unbelievable coach, unbelievable in terms of just his intelligence and how he understands the game and how he teaches the game, but equally just as good of a person. And so got to work with him for 6 years there, which, we had success, and it led to having an opportunity to be a head coach in the USHL, which in turn led to having an opportunity to work in the National Hockey League. But like I said, it's, everybody's path is different. I wouldn't trade my path for any other path. I was a terrible player. But because of that and because of how I started off, I developed a work ethic and a passion, and that works for me. And so, like because of that, I've just been able to have all these experiences and work with other people and people that, I've been able along the way to just see how they work and take little things from those different people that have helped me just through this path.
That's awesome. Congratulations on having the second best team ever in the Chicago Steelers history. Good coaching.
Waiting for that. Waiting for that to get thrown out.
Yeah, no, Dan was a criminal justice major. I was just a criminal. So that's kind of no, I have a unique story, I guess, like everybody else. When I was playing high school hockey, I kind of fell out of love with hockey. I didn't really like my coach very much. Now in hindsight, probably the things he was telling me to change in my behavior, he was probably the one who was right. But anyways, I hated him and I fell out of love with hockey and I stopped playing. And then I was 18 years old. I started coaching like a low-level Bantam B team with no intention ever to work in hockey. I just was like, well, I'll just coach these kids. They were 14. I was 18. I was like, I'll just coach these kids. And I don't know much about coaching hockey, but I'll just make it fun for them. And if they have a good time, then I think they'll be happy, with the experience that they had. And I did that for a couple years while I was trying to go to college. It took me 6 years to get a bachelor's degree, but that's neither here nor there. So I, started to do that. And I just, really fell in love with coaching, fell in love with just the interaction with the kids and helping to, inspire, people to chase whatever their dreams were. And then, I had some adversity as a teenager just in my family situation. So I felt like I was always able to look on those experiences and connect with kids, whatever challenges that they had. It was just kind of something that came naturally to me. And I was really lucky. One of the guys whose kids on my team is Dave Gregory, who works for Central Scouting and is a great hockey family. And one day we were at a hotel. I was probably 20 years old, and he was like, hey, you should do this for a job. And I was like, I never thought about doing this for a job. All right, what do I do? And so anyways, he knew Sean Hanna, who was the head coach at Sacred Heart at the time. And he was like, hey, I'll connect you with this guy. Just go volunteer and do whatever he tells you to do and get experience and see where it leads. So Dan was the assistant coach at that time. So that's how I met him. And those first years, it was like a coaching internship, but there was no coaching at all. I was just filing papers and doing whatever they told me to do for $0. They gave me a stick, that was nice. They gave me a stick and I got, a meal on the road. So it was good. And I loved every second of it. It was just like, I loved being around a team and Dan, I think Dan has been a guy who, in my entire experience, I always look up to him. I guess in that process, after I graduated, Dan connected me with Bill Kangas, and I went to coach at Williams College. My situation was a little better than Dan's. I got $6,500 in a meal plan, so I, was moving up in the world doing that. And then, I kind of just felt like I just have to carve out my own niche. I didn't play a high level. I watched Dan. I've still to this day, never been around anyone that works as hard as Dan. So I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to outwork that guy. So I got to find other ways to do this. And, one thing led to another. I went from there 1 year, Division III. We had a great season at Williams College. I got a job coaching the North American Hockey League and head coach, GM. I thought it was on my way. And I got fired after like 5 games. I think I have the record for the shortest tenure in the North American Hockey League. I don't think it'll ever be broken. And that was a great, I look back on that. And it's funny, a lot of the ideas that we've implemented in Chicago, like I had those ideas 10 years ago. I just didn't know what I didn't know and was too green and learned some really hard lessons. And I went back to Connecticut, volunteered with Sacred Heart again. And then they ended up having an opening at the end of the season, which I figured, I'd been there 2 years as a student, came back as a volunteer. Like, this is great. I'll get full-time employment in hockey. And they didn't hire me. So that was that was a gut punch, and at that point, I was kind of ready to give up. And you know, I think everyone kind of seems like they're going to go into finance when hockey doesn't work out. I was the same. I was like trying to ask anybody in that business that I knew. I say, hey, if I can't do something I love, at least I'll make some money. So I was doing that. And then opportunity, I was working with Central Scouting as a volunteer, just covering the New England area for them and running a skills company. And I was coaching 3 teams, 2 Bantam teams and a squirt team, and just doing whatever I could to scrape enough money to kind of pay my way through college while I was there and stay in hockey. So, and then I, you know, went through that whole process, and opportunity came with National Team Development Program, which, you know, that kind of changed my life. Like, I think that gave me a second chance and, you know, gave me a chance to really be connected with such a, you know, high level program. And then obviously did that for a few years and went to work for the Bruins, which was awesome. I think for me, I felt like going to Boston, you know, the NHL was something that I had never been a part of. And I felt like it was something really important to get on my resume and get experience doing. And then this thing came open in Chicago. So, you know, it's been a really long process to this point. I think it's been a lot of fun for me. I feel like I'm playing with house money, you know, like everyone says, oh, you should not say this or not do this. I'm like, if you knew where I started from, you would be like, hey, what the heck's the difference? No chance you're ever going to have a job, you moron. So, you know, I just feel so blessed every day to be in this position and have built, you know, relationships, and it's a lot of fun. So I think that was great for everyone. I think it'll be great information for people to take that. All the stories are different, and it's not as easy as you just showed up one day and got a job and life was gravy. So I guess I'll go to the questions that we have from some of the people on Twitter. And I guess Woody and Snowy, you guys haven't talked in a long time. So I'll go to you guys with these 2 questions, and then we can kind of get it going. So I guess the first question is, what is advice that you give for someone who wants to work in the hockey industry but doesn't know, you know, what they want to do, what kind of, you know, area they want to go in? What advice would you guys give?
You're just saying we're the unlikeliest guys to get in. That's what you're saying by starting with us, aren't you?
No, that would be me, the criminal, not the criminal justice major.
What do you want to go?
Well,
I mean, I get a lot of calls, right? And maybe it's because people can look at me and say, you know, he didn't have a hockey playing background. He's managed to kind of work his way up and stay in the business. I mean, I tell people you need something that is a valuable skill set to bring. I get a lot of students who call who are getting a sports management degree, and I have a hard time coming up with a recommendation for them because it's a general pursuit, right? Okay, I want to be in hockey and I want to manage something, but I think a more specific skill set at this point is likely to get you in. I mean, just speaking from an area that I manage, which is our hockey analysis area, I did a little bit of research poking around with teams in preparing my own budget recently, and I found that what a team would have spent that would have had you ranking about 2nd or 3rd in the league in an analytical staffing budget 2 years ago would now have you ranking 11th, 12th, 13th. So I think there's more openings for people who have a background that is in computer science, economics, the ability to organize information and represent that in data. But if that's not your area, I think you need to find a way in that is your area. It's something you can do or you can learn to do. I've had students come and say, what if I get a law degree and then I could potentially work up to an assistant GM? And I say, well, what if that doesn't work out? Are you going to be happy with a law degree and practicing law for the rest of your life? And they'll often say, no, I'm doing that to enhance my chances of becoming an assistant GM. So I've always encouraged people to find a specific skill set that you can find fulfillment in. Find that fulfillment in whatever line of work you can while beginning to find your way into hockey, whether it's in the Western Hockey League out here, when I talk to students here, in college, wherever it may be, the USHL, and just begin to build a network of people who believe in you and will give you a little bit more opportunity. Because once you get in that door, you've got to find your way to stay. But once you're in, if you can fill gaps, it's an industry you can stay in because it's a relationship industry. Woody?
I look at the 8 people that are sitting on this panel and how different everybody's path is getting here. And for me, there's a big difference for all of us in the success that each of us has, however you define success. And whatever track you decide to take, I think a big part of that is being able to demonstrate that somewhere in your history you've had an ability to make some hard decisions. That's what teams are going to be looking for. So like Craig had said, everybody's going to say that they work hard, but that's just completely normal. It's about understanding the landscape of the job that you're looking for, the timing of it, knowing when to talk to GMs and assistant GMs and people that are hiring. And then really just at some point, you have to stop talking and just take that next step and do it and just cross that threshold for the first time. And, those are all small steps in our career. And you might not get there this year. You might not get there for 2 or 3 years, but you will get there in 5 years. And the training that you're doing wherever you're working right now, it might help you be on a different team down the road that's going to help you get to where you want to be. My suggestion to anybody watching this is just, Craig talked about his affinity for Bill Belichick earlier, and just you find one thing that you're good at and you do it better than anybody else. And just like a player, you bring one thing to the rink you do with you great, and you bring it every single day. If you can have an ability to demonstrate that you've worked within limited resources, because no teams really want to spend money, and then just like Chris said, if you can make up for any of your deficiencies with effort, that usually trumps everything else. So manage your relationship to people that you meet. I'd like to get Pat's business card from the guy from Budweiser right now in this COVID thing. I'd like to see if I can get that sent to my house. And just staying in touch with everybody you can, and then doing it with sincerity. To me, that's the one thing that gets lost in all this. There's a networking aspect of things, but there's an aspect of you doing things with sincerity, which I've always found has been beneficial in helping me get to anywhere I've been lucky enough to get to.
Can I just pipe in for a quick second here and, to echo what Todd and Chris just said, and there's examples and, Pat, you recruit players. One of the things I always tell young players, play, just go and play. You don't have to worry about the scouts finding you. If you're good enough and you do the things that are necessary, you'll find their eyes. I mean, I think Noelle is just a great example of that. Ryan, you're watching her team play. You're watching, you go, wait a second here. This is somebody that's pretty impressive. I like what they're doing. And I think that's the same thing, Chris and Todd, you talk about, do something, do it with enthusiasm, do it with passion. And, don't be afraid to volunteer. Don't be afraid to say, I want to help you out, because everybody wants to be helped. And if you can demonstrate that you're willing to do that, and, Steve, you talk about giving up your finance job, working at a warehouse on the graveyard shift because where you wanted to go, you do find your way. And Todd, to your point real quickly is that, take that step. Sometimes by not taking the step, we hold ourselves back.
Yeah, I think one thing I'll just add to that is, like, you listen to all our stories and our backgrounds, and one thing I've always told people, and I think it's so clear right now, is there is no blueprint. Like when I stepped into hockey, my dad said, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to get there? What are you going to, there's no roadmap. But I think one thing that is, becomes even clearer is taking different opportunities in hockey. Hey, maybe you're a coach, but there's a development opportunity. Maybe you want to be in development. There's a scouting opportunity. We've all worn such different hats in this game, and that's got us to the different positions we're at. So being willing to take on a role inside the game and finding out if that's where you're passionate inside hockey, that might lead you to the next part. That might lead you from scouting to development, or development to a front office. So I don't think you can be single-minded in, hey, I just want to do this. And when I was with LA for 6 years, then I left to coach at Boston University because David Quinn asked me to do it, join him, and it never crossed my mind coaching. And, that turned into a great opportunity to recruit and kind of build a team. That's what you do in college hockey, as we all know. So being willing to accept that there's not a blueprint, but there's going to be opportunities, and you got to be willing to take, these jobs at Williams or at Milton Academy, whatever it is.
I don't know who you're kidding. You didn't do any coaching at Boston University. I think just kind of segueing from that, like, I think that, like none of you on this thing I knew before I knew you in hockey. I think that the relationship part is so important. So I kind of think maybe Pat and Craig, since you guys have, don't work with the team and kind of get connectivity to everybody around the game and players. I think there's a misnomer. I think it's an easy excuse for people that can't get in of, I don't know anybody, or everybody that's in has a relationship, where the reality is all these relationships are built. So can you guys, kind of talk about that experience and how important relationship building is for you guys on a daily basis and for, anyone looking to break in?
I can go ahead, Craig. I think like we've been talking about relationships and how to build relationships, how to maintain relationships, and it's all in the same bucket, so to speak. I mean, if you can't find a way to build relationship or to get there, then obviously you can't skip the first step. I mean, you got to find a way somehow. And the one email I get a lot from young student after school, they're looking for their next step or their next career. They say, how do I become an agent? And I, like Steve said, there's no blueprint. I always say, it's not written in any books how to become an agent. And that's my first line. In other words, when I started back then, I mean, it was only contract negotiations. You still have to nurture relationships for sure, but it was only negotiations of contract. You had to have an eye for talent. But now, 30 years later, I mean, there's marketing and management, there's player development. There's so many. We have 22 people working with us worldwide, and there's got to be a bucket somewhere where you can fit. As long as you understand your identity, you have to understand who you are and where you're good at, and there's more opportunities now than ever, in my opinion, because there's just more to do. If you're good in analytics, if you're good in marketing, if you're good with social media, if you understand social media, Instagram and Snapchat and so on and so forth, you don't have to be a hockey guy. But if you understand that, that's the wave that players are looking to brand themselves, teams and everyone now today. So I guess this role relationship thing is key, how to build, but you have to kick yourself in the butt and find a way somehow. It's not for everyone to have it naturally, but this is an area, unless you have an amazing resume in something, and then unless you're really unique in one area, like that. But those guys are the ones creating software, or they're amazing musicians, or we're not in that category. In 99% of population, you have to find a way. So anyway, I didn't want to defer in the question, but that's how I view. That's the question that I answer the most time. Like, how do I become an agent? What do I need to do? And I guess I start with that. And like you said at the beginning, Ryan, we can't take every calls, we can't take every text or emails, but we want to give back. We want to make sure that because we were there at one point where we're knocking on doors and people are not getting our calls back, or opening the doors for us. So I've always promised myself, the same as you, that one day if I have a chance to, I'll make sure I return as much as possible. So I'm glad that we're doing what you're doing now, because we can probably answer these questions, on the bigger mass,
Yeah, no, I think just building off that, Craig, if you could, touch too on the relationship piece. And then I know, Craig, you're involved in so many areas, and I feel like with your presence in so many platforms, a lot of people come to you for advice. So I guess build up that relationship piece. And then can you talk about, like, one of the questions I got was the impact of advanced degrees in sport management, and Snowy talked about it a little bit of, that part. And I do think it's funny when this just started happening to me. I feel like in the last couple of years, when people would apply for a job, and now young people are so brash in like what it is they want. Like, I remember being so meek when I first started. I was like, I don't know, I'll do anything you want me to do. And now, you meet a kid right out of college, no experience, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to be a general manager, NHL, and I'm like, whoa. I don't even say that, and I'm like, I've been grinding away. So, I just kind of wanted to go to you for your thought on those things.
Yeah, well, I'll start off. I have two daughters that are 26 and 23. And so when you talk about brash, I'm living it every day. Like, and like, it's not.
And I probably shouldn't be the person to call anybody brash, but that's
no. And I don't think we were any different when we were younger. We just didn't express it. I mean, you talk, Ryan, about your experience with the coach. What an idiot the coach was, right? Like we start with a first job. What an idiot that guy is. Can you believe he's a manager, right? Like now they just express it, right? And they are more confident. And, you know, social media and those platforms have opened it up, right? Where they feel a lot more confident because they get reinforcement. They get reinforcement from their generation and from the people they're surrounded. And, you know, we all know that we come across some incredibly bright and talented people. And I'm going to go back to Chris's earlier comment. You know, I get lots of inquiries. You know, what can I do here? Well, I got a sports management. I'm doing this. I talk to sports management classes. I talk to different groups, you know, in university. And the one thing, well, what do you want to do? I'm always amazed how many people don't know what they want to do. They just kind of go, it's hockey. And I said, so if you wanted to go into the packaged goods industry and you want to work in packaged goods, do you just say, I just want to work in packaged goods? Because I can guarantee you Procter & Gamble needs to understand, you know, what you're going to bring and where you think you can help in the company. So I try to help them narrow it down to what you want to be. Do you want to be a sports agent? Do you want to be in the front office, legal? Do you want to be in player development? Wherever you want to go, there's so many different paths. But when I talk to people, I try to have them, you know, express, whether it be if they want to scout, okay, well, go and watch some games and then give me some feedback on what you saw. And then let's talk about it. And, you know, it's not that I'm right or they're wrong. It's just about an exchange to try to help them understand, hey, this is what somebody may be looking for. You know, you talk about being concise and being able to write reports like Noelle talked about. You need to learn that. You need to go through it so that when the opportunity does come, that you're comfortable expressing your thoughts. It's not good enough to just say, well, he's a good skater, I think he's a star. It's not going to work. You've got to be able to paint a picture, and that picture of when you're scouting a player, and we all do that in different ways, but also you got to be able to paint a picture of yourself for where you want to go and work. And so, you know, again, I don't need to add anything. It's incredibly important to have good relationships, you know, to be eager to learn, to be open-minded, you know, to disagree in an amicable way. Those are all healthy things, but the relationships are important. But if you're not able to, I don't want to say sell yourself, but, you know, put out there, here's what I can do and here's what I'm willing to do, it becomes really difficult for anybody to really zero in on you. So again, to Pat's point, to everybody's point, you got to find a way, but as you're finding that way, you got to start narrowing in and then understand how you can contribute.
A theme across this entire group, I think, is patience, right? I mean, Dan's a great example, and all of you really are. But, you know, I've come to think of this idea of being employed in the league almost as a rent, lease, buy kind of thing. You know, someone comes in and they have the capacity to help in some way, and you might, you know, try them out in a couple of ways where they're not getting paid, but they're demonstrating, you know, on a volunteer basis, here's what I can do. And then you may give them a little part-time work, and they're still doing their regular day job if they have one. There are a lot of scouts who scout part-time and fight fires or do whatnot during the week. I have people who work for my analysis department who are at a bank during the day, and then when their wife and kids go to bed, they start grinding away on their computer, or video analysts who start analyzing games in USHL or the NHL from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And there's a process there to demonstrate that of the finite number of jobs that are available in the NHL, there should be a real reason to pull you in and give you one of those. And that's kind of the buy stage. And it's so hard to in the league to hire, because it's such a small group of people who want to day-to-day manage that team or scout the critical players that you really can't afford a mistake. It's not really any different than players. So I think the theme of patience and realizing this isn't you, it's just the process to travel. And that there's nothing wrong with the NHL being a part-time job for you and having a full-time career, because there's stability to that while there's still reward on the side with the fact that you're touching the league.
I think just building off that, like Dan, I'll go to you and Todd. I think you guys, you know, both have reputations of just extremely hardworking people. Not that everyone else in the call is lazy, but you know, I think Dan, you gave me some unreal advice going back however many years ago it was. And it was like, if you could accept not making any money for 5 years, you could make a career in hockey, and that I thought was really good advice, and it made sense. And I think that sometimes people want to rush that process and think that, all the glitz and glamour, comes so fast, and it doesn't. I do think there's a lot of people that, take a job or try to take a shortcut just because of the money. So they'll start down a good path with great experience at like a Williams College, and then they'll go for X amount of dollars and run like a midget program, and then they get stuck in that because they're making too much money to come back. But so just kind of building off that, if you could speak to that advice that you gave me, and then also for you and Todd to talk about, I think there's an outside perspective that this is so glamorous and that this is all the time just this incredible, thing. And I mean, outside of Pat, we all fly commercial and most of us sit in coach, reels. But, can you guys talk about just like the grind of the job and sorry, Pat, I never saw you so red. The grind of the job and just how much, you guys put in. And I could speak for myself. I've never felt for a day in this, like people say, oh, you give up this or you don't do this job. Like as Craig said in the open, I think we're all in love with hockey and this is what we would love to do. So it never feels like a sacrifice, but there is a sacrifice. And if you guys could just talk through that and your experience, with that.
Yeah. First on that advice I gave you, and that was a long time ago, that was advice I got from Mike Cavanaugh, head coach at UConn. I'm sure he doesn't even remember telling me, but I called him when I was making that decision kind of to go down that coaching road full time, trying to become a teacher. In those years, I remember I called, just kind of got connected and with some different coaches to get some advice. But I think, you made a really good point there too about that. A lot of people rushing the process. Like when I started coaching, I didn't say, I want to get in coaching to coach in the NHL. I'm blessed to have this opportunity. There's been great people and great players that I've had the opportunity to work with along the way that have helped me get there. But that was never, I didn't go into it as a goal. I think if I had gone into it as the goal, I don't think I ever would be where I am. I went into it because I love I love coaching and I love teaching. And, it's just something where every day you wake up and you're excited. And I don't feel like this is a job. But that's why I got into it. And then, and I feel like along the way too, it hasn't been a rush process. I've been fortunate. There have been years I've moved from one job to the next, but along the way, there was never the thought of like, I'm doing this. I'm waking up today to try to get another job. Like I was waking up to try to do the best job that I can and to enjoy it. And I think you really have to enjoy where you are and embrace where you are and take everything out of it that you possibly can. And also with those relationships too, like having those be genuine and not trying to just move on to that next relationship, but to really embrace the one that you have. And I'll tell you, like the jobs I've gotten a lot of times have just been by some sort of relationship that I've had, some sort of word of mouth. And it's never been really from the person I would have expected it to come from. It's just been, even going back to as a player, like a guy I didn't mention before, but like Paul Vincent, the skills coach for Florida now. Like I used to skate with him every summer. I did it because I loved going to the rink every day and I worked hard for him. And he was a guy who ended up making a huge impact in terms of encouraging me to get into coaching and the way he's helped and where he's been for guidance and somebody I still see all the time now. It wasn't because I was trying to get a job. It's because I just liked going and being around. And, just each job that I've had, like even here in Nashville, this was, the late Jim Johansson. Like I got an opportunity to work for him and, he made a recommendation to Peter Laviolette and to David Poyle. At no point when I was a video coach at World Juniors was I ever thinking that this is going to help. This relationship is going to lead to one in the NHL. I just embraced where I was. I wanted to be around the coaches that I had an opportunity to be working with and learn from them. And so you got to really enjoy that process and let it take care of itself. Like if you work hard and you work smart and you're great to the people that are around you, usually good things are going to come from that. And no matter what, I think you're going to enjoy kind of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So, in terms of the grind, like It definitely is a grind. It doesn't feel like one, like in the sense that I think everybody who's either on this right now or who's spending the time listening to this later loves what they do. So, you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about the game, you're thinking about coaching, or you're thinking about like how you're going to be able to help your players or whatever it is that your involvement in the game is. And you go to bed at night and you're usually thinking about it as well. So it's fortunate because it's a business of passion. And, with that, I think I found over time as I get older, you learn to balance things a little bit better. You learn to work smarter for sure. Like that's been a big thing for me. Like I've worked hard because I love what I do and I want to be good at it. And I want to be able to help the organizations I work for. But, I think as you go through it too, like you learn how to work smarter, you learn how to manage your time. I'm sure everybody on this call probably wishes that we had more than 24 hours in every day. So that we can get more done. But I think, like you try to pack in as much as you possibly can. But I've found over time that it's also that ability to work smart. And then, for me, once you have a family too, it's learning that balance. And that's something that takes time. And that's something that I know, like I'm not perfect at, but I try to get better because, I'm going to be, everything's connected. If I'm a good husband and a good father, then I'm going to be able to do my job better. And it's important too when you become, I think, especially as a parent, like your priorities end up changing. But I think it's finding that balance as well because it's something that because everybody loves what they're doing, it just absolutely can consume you. And there's never, it's endless in the sense that there's always something that you can be doing. There's always something that you can be learning. There's always some way that you can be growing. So you have to find that balance too of making sure that you're effective in what you're doing rather than just trying to almost do too much.
I think my answer is going to be really brief because it's very similar to Dan's, is that the destination doesn't have to be the NHL. Like, so if you're using your yardstick of being in the NHL as being your measure of success, I'm going to tell you, I don't agree with you because you're able to influence players and people all across the world and never even set foot in an NHL arena. So you could be helping young players play, Ryan, like you said, with a midget program that, or it could be high school teams or whatever. Those could be successful situations, and that might be your destination too. So don't just equate being in the NHL as that's what success is. That's the first thing. The second thing is something I hear Paul Maurice say every single day is that you better enjoy what you do for a living, and then we want to win. And one doesn't usually happen without the other. That's on the coaching side and that's on the management side. So everybody here really does seem to enjoy what they do for a living. And the last thing, except really for Noelle's story about her resume there, and it was a blind resume, most people that are on this call probably haven't really made a lot of resumes or CVs or whatever. Like I don't think I've ever made a resume. It's because of the people that you meet and the people who care about you, and then they shepherd you along the way. And then now we each have a responsibility to do that to the people that are also looking for some help. So I think that would be the exact same thing. Everything that Dan said, I would agree with wholeheartedly.
One thing I thought you said was interesting about the NHL not being the destination. Like, I think a mistake that people make so often is that, like, their identity, especially when they get in the NHL, gets so tied to being to the Shield. And I would say for me, like, going back to Chicago and going to a lower level, it was a risky decision, but it was a great decision, and I think that sometimes, you have to, bet on yourself a little bit. And I think that, there probably are too many people that I've come across that you just start to get complacent and you're like, it just becomes about keeping their job and keeping that identity as a scout or as something. And I think that, like you guys are saying, if you are always motivated by your passion and driven by like wanting to be great in what you're doing at that point, other opportunity comes for you, and it just opens more doors doing it that way as opposed to, being so about an end game. So I guess moving from that, and this can kind of be an everybody question. Like I would start with Noelle, but everyone has a perspective. Like Noelle, you, on top of working for the Leafs, run a business, a hockey business, a couple hockey businesses. Like, what does everybody think that the most important qualities are in people that you hire? Obviously, Todd, you're going to go through a hiring process, to round out your staff and and all the other guys do, this on an all the time basis. So I guess this can be an everybody question. What do you think are the most important qualities that you look for to bring somebody into your organization, within hockey?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually I had a conversation about this earlier today as well. And I think to just kind of go back, so many people I think are in such a rush to have instant gratification and be at a certain level and make a certain amount of money. And what I've found just listening to this panel, which is phenomenal, is just how present everyone has been at each stage and step that they've taken throughout their career. And that has obviously allowed everyone to develop their own opinions and philosophies within the game and so forth. And so for me, I think it's just really important to have continual learning, but to also have a willingness to have an opinion and then a philosophy as to what you want to do with the game. And for us, how we hire, that's really important. We want intelligent people that want to not only advance in the game, but make a difference in it. And I think that's what's so fun about hockey, is that it's ever changing. And then in addition to that, character to me it's more important than a resume. It's more important than what you've accomplished in terms of education, work ethic, all of those things. And just as I mentioned that out loud, that's obviously another underlying note here for every single person on this panel. So just for people watching, wanting to get in the business, wanting to advance in it, I can only stress that you're present and you're giving everything you have where you're at currently. And usually, as we're all seeing, opportunities arise from that.
I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry, anybody?
Yeah, I would say, like, for me, hey, we've talked a lot about hard work and passion. Like, I think one of the things that's so important is the ability to communicate and the ability to collaborate. I think communication skills, being able to work with, your peers, being able to work with other scouts or other coaches, being able to communicate with players you might be recruiting or players that you're coaching. I think being able to just communicate through a chain and keep things flowing is so crucial in any business, but we certainly see it in hockey where, Ryan, I know, communicates great with his staff, and, all of us do that. I'm sure, in different ways we approach communicating with our coworkers. But I think it's just so crucial to the process and to find success. So for me, communication skills are something that can't be overlooked.
I think a real team orientation is critical. Honestly, I had to learn that. I came from a profession that was a real individual profession. You went to a game or to write a story, and you had a byline the next day, and it was all yours. So when Doug Risebrough got let go in Minnesota, my wife actually wrote him a handwritten letter thanking him for changing my personality for the better. So if you're team oriented, it's going to be a lot easier for you from the start. So that's definitely, that's one. I think you have to be a self-starter. Nobody has time to tell somebody what to do on a daily basis. You got to bring that energy and drive to identify the gaps, to fill those gaps, to make a difference on a daily basis, really. And you've got to be willing to grow. Our league is changing rapidly in the way we scout, in the way we do everything, the way that coaches have to coach this generation of player. So I think if those three tools aren't in the box, it's going to be a challenge for anybody. And there's probably a dozen or more, but those three come to mind.
For us, from an agency standpoint, for us, we're in a service business. For us, we go to a game, for instance, a junior game or college, whatever. It's like, most scouts, they leave probably with 5 minutes left in the game. They've done their work. They write their reports and all that. they communicate it back to their teams. But for us, that's almost where the work starts. At the end of the game, we have 2 clients or 6 clients. We want to make sure that we're there talking to them. Some are on a high or low, depending on the results of the game. So the worst place for us is after a game. Sometimes you got 2 teams, obviously, and you have like 2 clients or 4 clients on each team. There's going to be unhappiness and all, but you have to have servicing is key. You have to have that mindset that you're there to service and to listen, to absorb, and be there when your client needs you to be there. Could be at 6 a.m. If could be late at night. A lot of times late at night, players needs to vent. You have to be willing and able to do that, to listen and to be patient that way. I look for the traits that I look for, consistency and work ethic. Work ethic is huge because it's not always fun on a Saturday night to get a phone call from 2 clients at midnight, or it's good to be on the West Coast. At least it's a little earlier. For us, but it happens. Sometimes you're at dinner with your family, but it's important. Player got hurt. You need to speak to doctors, to GMs, everyone right away. You got to drop everything and focus right there. So servicing, work ethic, and within those 2, the third bucket, which is all important too, is collaboration and team. If you're not a team player on our team, it doesn't work. If a client at CAA is a client for everyone, everyone's together. We go to games. I could have 2 employees at CAA, with 7 clients. They're not, let's say, directly linked to these clients, but they make sure to connect with these clients. Like no matter what, like they're not the point, but they're involved because the clients are part of the team and we're part of the team as well. We're all in it together. So for us, those are 3 major criteria that I look for someone who wants to be in the agency business.
I guess just, kind of going in a different direction. Craig, I'll go to you. Having been a manager and had so many different roles, what advice would you give for a person who is maybe working on the team side and wants to transition to hockey operations within an NHL club, like to make that jump? What do you think they should do, or what are some things they could do without compromising the job that they have? I'd imagine it's a little bit delicate.
Yeah, I think that, we've heard the term, collaboration, teamwork. Noelle talked about being present. I mean, Pat just made a great example of how he has to be present for his clients. I mean, and if that happens while he's in the middle of a nice dinner, doesn't matter. You got to be present for them. Like, I think it can be delicate, but I think if you've demonstrated that you're a team player, you're willing to grow, you're willing to contribute, you're seen as somebody that wants to contribute and take on more work. I think that's how you expand. I don't think you just dismiss what you're doing. I think a big mistake is if you start thinking that the work you're presently doing doesn't be treated with the same importance as you try to pursue something else, you're going to run yourself into a lot of problems, because not only are you not performing your duty and your responsibilities, you're leaving other things short. So if you're within that group and you want to expand, again, that might be saying, like, I'll use Chris as an example. Chris is working in one area and they're working on big negotiations in the summer. Chris says, hey, listen, tell me what I can do to help you, to take some of that off your plate. You demonstrate it in different ways to try to show that you're capable of more. You can't just say you want more. You got to be able to demonstrate it. But, I think that if you're that team player, you're willing to collaborate, and collaboration's a huge thing, that now you're demonstrating it and showing it. People aren't looking at you and saying, oh, look at him, he just wants her. Look at her. They just want to move out of what they're presently doing into something else. I think it does become a scenario where you really look at it as collaboration, and you're now able to try to look at advancing your career and trying to grow. But it has to start with the mindset that you're a team player and that you're willing to collaborate and help.
Noelle, I got a question for you. I think that we would all agree, and hockey has made a lot of strides recently in being, more opportunity for women, more opportunity for people of color, underrepresented groups. Now, on the flip side of that, I will say that being so close to you, I get frustrated at times where it's like Noelle Needham is the female scout. Like, I quite frankly think that's kind of bullshit. And I think in some ways it diminishes, how excellent you are at your job. So can you kind of talk through that process, one, and then also, as a secondary thing, what advice would you have for people trying to break in, in an underrepresented group that maybe, is obvious, or maybe some that, is maybe more honest than, just, hey, giving some kind of fluff answer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a part of this, or I don't want to be involved in the game just because I'm a female. And I think that gets misconstrued just in this whole conversation. But I don't want to be excluded from having opportunity either because of that. And I just am so thankful that I'm a part of an organization that put together a merit-based process that really eliminated that angle completely. And for me, just, it was an opportunity that I took advantage of, and I was good enough to earn. And I'm very fortunate that it started with an open-mindedness and a well thought out process that enabled me to be in a position that I'm in right now. So that's really how I view this. And I think that the hockey continues to make great strides. And if you're able to contribute and you're able to be successful in a position that you're put in, then I think all the other stuff is and should be irrelevant if you're able to earn it. And I think that's very important.
No, that's great. And I think that obviously we've been on here for 90 minutes, and I appreciate everyone, taking all the time. I think just before we go, if everyone can just kind of maybe highlight one thing that they learned, through this process that they think could help people trying to break in, or maybe one thing even that they were shocked, about it in their experience, and we can just leave people with that.
I can go. For me, especially when you're breaking in, I think it's just so crucial to surround yourself with good people. So I look back at when I started in LA, and it was Dean Lombardi, Ron Hextall, Dave Taylor was there, Mike O'Connell, Jack Ferrara. Like, for me, that was so crucial to my development. And David Quinn was great. And then it was Jeff Gordon and Chris Drury and Jason Botterill. Like, if I had to look back and a team offered me twice as much money as the LA Kings did, I know I made the right choice, starting in that group. So being able to surround yourself with people that you can learn from and that you trust and are going to be able to guide you, certainly in the beginning, I just think is crucial to your own development. And that can happen with the Paul Canadas of the world or Coach Kangas at Williams. Like, that's everywhere. So every step you take, if you feel like you're surrounding yourself with good people that you can learn from, that can lead to your own success and certainly opportunities. And I know that, each different step I've had, there's a lot of people I can thank, and I was very fortunate to work with some very intelligent people, some hardworking people, and high character people.
I'll go next, just so that we don't end with my nonsense and we can get some, messages to leave. I think some of the best advice that I've gotten, kind of in twofold, now that I'm kind of the boss of my department or my team. I think it's really important. Like Don Sweeney, when I was working at Boston, he said something I loved, and it was like, nobody works for me, everybody works with me. And I thought that was like it just resonated with me. It's kind of corny, but it resonated with me for whatever reason. I think that for all of us, I think this is a humbling game. Like I know for me, to get to work in this game and meet so many guys that were my heroes when I was a little kid, and I've never, forgotten kind of when I was a little kid, and how much I revered them, and just to, have appreciation for what you are, and be there to serve the people if they, do work for you, that you're there to elevate them. And then the best advice, or some other good advice I got, was from Dan McKinnon, who works for the New Jersey Devils. And he was like, you have to build a brand. He was like, there's so many people that are competing for these jobs. There's so few jobs, and you have to do something that separates you, and do something that makes you, unique. And I think that I've had some success, and it gets me in trouble in times too, of just kind of saying it like it is, and just calling a spade, and being open to talk to people and tell them how I really feel. I think that people have valued that authentic, component from me. And, sometimes I had another buddy, he was telling me, he said, people learn by someone teaching them, they learn by doing, or they learn by touching the electric fence. And I generally only learn by touching the electric fence. But I think that, being who you are and being true to yourself is really important. So that would be kind of, my thing. And so I'll go, whoever. Todd, if you want to go after that.
I'd say just the fact of education, continuing your education in this process of whatever it is you want to do inside this game. So 2 words that I took out of today were patience and presence, which I think are 2 really important words. So the patience and understanding, and an ex-GM gave me some advice at one point, and he said to me, you have to understand that teams, their timelines are not the same as your timeline. So while you might want to have a job right away, if that's July 1st, they're not going to get back to you. And that job that might be available, they might be looking to hire or fill that job inside August or September. And even understanding nowadays what's going on, there's not a lot of teams that are looking to add to their departments right now. So just being patient, believing in what you're doing in the process, and then just being present. So at some point you're going to get an opportunity. Like Noelle said, you have to be present there, and there's going to be a now what moment. Now what do I do? So whether it's a job shift inside your organization like we talked about, or whether it's coaching and they just tied it up and it's 1-1 now, there's going to be a now what moment for you inside your career, and you have to be able to answer to that. And all that comes from me, from the process. Never cheat the process, never shortcut anything. And I firmly believe, even people that have applied for jobs to be on my staff lately, who I wasn't able to bring onto a staff, I've said to each and every one of them, him or her, do not give up. Do not give up, because somewhere there's somebody who will give up, and that's one more opportunity opening up for you.
Craig, I know you got to run. So do you want to go here, and then you can be free?
Free me up. Hey, I think, just to echo what Todd said, and what Noelle talked, you got to be present. And Pat talked about it with his clients, and you have to understand where you are. Number 2, there has to be a growth mindset. Hockey life is not a static exercise. It's something that we're always continuing to grow. Every day is an opportunity to be better, and you're either getting better or you're falling behind. So it's a real simple choice to me. If you want to keep getting better and keep growing, you got to move forward, because if not, you're falling behind. And then Dan talked about it earlier. The NHL, everybody has these like higher or highest dreams and goals. And I get that the NHL is, but do not dismiss where you're at, and that how important what you're contributing to, what you're part of, can not only be influencing the people you're working with, the people you may be coaching, whoever you're involved with, but it's also helping you build your philosophy. Ryan, you talked about coaching Bantam. You talked about going to the North American Hockey League. And even though you lasted a very short time, your philosophies, got tested, but they didn't get put out, and so you had to move on to the next step, right? And, I think that those are things that you always have to really keep in mind. And I will finish with this. I coached Dan McKinnon in Bantam hockey, small world, back in Montreal. At least I can say he didn't quit hockey because of his coach.
I'd like to make another point too, based on that, Craig. You and I are probably the oldest there on the panel. And the one thing I've learned a few years ago, I was on retreat at CAA, and Coach K from Duke's came and spoke to us. And at that time it was probably 65. I don't remember exactly, but the main term, his approach was adapting. And he said, if I didn't adapt, he says, if I still recruit 30 years, the way I did 30 years ago today, I'd be as good as gone. I wouldn't be in this business. I had to adapt. For you guys grow into your careers. I've been doing it for close to 30 years now, and I got to adapt on a day-to-day basis. I got to listen to the young generations coming in. If I don't adapt, I'm not going to recruit. I'm not going to maintain. I'm going to be gone soon. I can't be a dinosaur. And so I have to understand the player's mentality. I mean, at least study that on a day-to-day basis as much as possible. The immune system, biohacking, all those other areas that we didn't even care about before. And when I have a young person come to my office trying to teach me and push my buttons to learn, to challenge me in a professional way, obviously, we both benefit. So that is important in order to continue. For us in this business, representing athletes, if I don't connect with a 17 or 18-year-old player, I don't connect the same way. If I don't bring anything to that kid, why would you want to be with me? I know we have other layers and other people involved, but it's important that I adapt and I understand their mentality, because the kids born in 95 are way different than the 2000s already. And the 90s are way different than the 95. It's amazing. 5 years is like 15 years back, probably 20 years ago. 3-4 years, it's almost a new generation. So adapting is key. So if you're a young person trying to jump into this business too, understand that if you have something, if you know your identity, if you can push someone's button like mine, more than welcome, because I want to learn, because I don't want to be gone. At least if I want to do this for many more years, hopefully,
You didn't have to blow your cover either. People would have thought you were the youngest person on this call.
I might say that one thing that I've learned, and people who aren't in the business wanting to get in would probably be happy to hear, is as an outsider, then someone in and then out and back in, hockey's a great life. I don't know if most professions are this way, but in hockey, people have real competitiveness, common interests. As much as it sounds like a cliche, and I've especially learned it in the last year, it really is a family, because a lot of us, most of us who work where the team is, coach the team, play for the team, we're not in the same city as we grew up where our family is. And so you become, the people at someone's birthday party and at their house on Christmas Eve. I didn't even know Ryan more than a month ago. I didn't know him. And then a week later, he's texting me about Ozark. Like, either he is that bored or hockey is that small of a circle and that close. And I think one of the great benefits is it becomes just a great social experience that rewards you around the clock and around the year. And it's a little bit cliche, but I think we've all experienced that, and we get a lot of it's a lifestyle. It's not just a job, and we appreciate that.
Noelle, go ahead.
All right, I can go. I've got two things. So our GM for our Tier 1 program, and actually is a very accomplished professional. He's the executive manager at the South Dakota Trust Company. He puts up a slide at the beginning of every season, and it's got two pictures on it. One is a straight line going up that says success, and then the next is a complete scribble around it and says an actual depiction of success. And I think that really that image really reiterates our entire conversation and pretty much sums it up. And the last thing I'll leave with is my dad has always said, and my parents are my favorite people in the world, but they said you have to be decisive. And that doesn't mean that you have to be right all the time, but you have to always be in a position to be able to make a decision, especially when it matters. And I think that's also very relevant in the industry and business and just life in general. So those would be my two little tokens of advice to end with.
Reels, you want to go? I know you got to get out to Nantucket or golf somewhere, and then we can go to Danny to wrap up.
No golfing at Mass right now, so no. I'm the only one on the East Coast, I think, so it's getting a little dark here. So you guys carry on.
Dan, you want to wrap it up, or Greels just speak, with your last bit of advice?
Danny, you can go and then I'll go.
Yeah, no, I think obviously a lot of really great stuff's already been said, so I don't want to repeat it. For me, I think some additional points are, be honest with yourself. I think sometimes, people in all businesses, but when you're working in sports, sometimes I think you almost put a guard up and you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable and be honest with yourself. Like, you're going to fail. And I think you got to learn from all experiences. And I think people that really show growth, like Craig said, with that growth mindset, are going to be the ones that really that learn from those times that they fail. When I worked with Yale, I had 2 years that were unbelievable, where it was Keith Elaine was the head coach and Red Gendron was there as the associate head coach, both guys that have won in the NHL. I worked in the NHL. Red's won everywhere he's been. He won a couple Stanley Cups in New Jersey. He won a national championship as an assistant coach at Maine. And so first time I met him, I said, it's like, wow, it's incredible how much you've won. This is like our first conversation. And he stopped and, he gave me this look where he was ready to lecture me. He's like, but I've also failed. And it always stood with me, where we talked about that afterwards. It was those failures too that he's had as a coach that I think he's learned from it. And he's just an unbelievable coach, an unbelievable person. But I just thought it was great. It was a great point by him. And it's something that really I always think about now. You can't just take those good years. Like, I've been fortunate to have some work with some organizations and teams that have had a lot of success, and you definitely learn for what it takes to win in those years. Things you want to take away, but also learn from those years where things don't go perfect. And when you're not perfect as a coach, because the reality is none of us are. And if we recognize that, and if you recognize that as a coach, and you're continuing to find ways to make yourself better and to make yourself a better part of the organization, a teammate within the coaching staff or within the team itself, then you're going to find that you'll be able to grow and have even more success.
I think, just to wrap it up for us and then lead into Ryan, Ryan asked us before this something that surprised us in hockey. And I think one of the biggest surprises for me when I started working in the game was how approachable some of the best players in the world were or are. And, you might see someone that you think, geez, I can't talk to him. This guy's a Hall of Famer. Well, I know from experience, and a lot of people do, it's quite the opposite. Like, there's a lot of people in this game looking to help. And, it's kind of why Ryan got us together. It's a group of people that are always trying to help more people break into the game. So, don't be afraid to approach people in the rinks or sitting next to them on an airplane, wherever it may be. So, Ryan, thanks for all of us. Thanks for getting us together. And, certainly something that, hopefully we can do annually or something.
Yeah, this was awesome. Obviously, this whole coronavirus situation is unfortunate for everybody, but there's been some other opportunities. So I think I just want to thank all of you for taking the time to do this. I think, for people that are looking to break into hockey, the information that you all gave them is invaluable. And I think the stories that everyone has, about their experience, are incredible and important for people to hear, and hopefully can inspire people, when they're ready to give up, that maybe they're closer, than they otherwise thought. And with that, as I'm going to post this on YouTube, and a lot of people gave away a lot of information here for no cost, but I did want to use this opportunity for us to raise some money for ALS research and treatment. So in the bio on YouTube underneath there'll be a link to that. And if you contribute $1, great. And if you contribute a lot more, that's great too, because every little bit helps. So thank everybody here for taking the time, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll all talk here in the coming weeks, since we have absolutely nothing to do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Noelle.
Thank you.
Bye.